Yo, it's Bo. Welcome back to Kerbol Komplete in Kerbal Space Program, where we're going to be exploring some of the planets from the Minor Planets expansion and the Outer Planets mod. Today we're going to the Titan analog of the Kerbal system, which is a moon called Tekto orbiting the Saturn analog Sarnus from the Outer Planets mod. This is kind of my giant interplanetary spacecraft. It's powered by a nuclear, it's basically like a huge variant of the Nerve engine, the nuclear rocket engine, except it's from the mod Kerbal Atomics, which just gives some cool variants to the Nerve engine that comes in the stock game. And for like our fuel, we're using liquid hydrogen, which is one of the fuel types that these Kerbal Atomic engines use from the mod Cryo Tanks. And we've just lifted off the pad here, and so this ship is huge, right? And we've used some stock-alike station parts, expansion Redux mod parts to that mod kind of gives like space station parts that you can use for your giant interplanetary spacecraft, or use them for like giant space stations as well. But yeah, so those are the mods that we're using for parts, but other than that, it's all stock. And we've just detached our first set of radial boosters, and we're just kicking our apoapsis up out of the atmosphere and getting ready to circularize. While we do that, I'll talk a little bit more about our mission profile for today. So the mission is to land a surface base on the surface of Tekto, and that's kind of our base right now is sitting inside that fairing on the nose of our rocket here. And to get our crew down to the surface and back, we'll be using two space planes that are mounted on each side just below the fairing. Those are two like little space planes that have propeller engines and rocket engines as well. And because the atmosphere of Tekto is so thick, I think it's about 1.25 times more thick than Kerbin's atmosphere, the propeller engines on these space planes will be really efficient, and we'll use that to get most of our way out of the atmosphere. Then we'll light up our rocket engines, and then we'll be able to make it to orbit in just a single stage with these two space planes here. And right now we're just setting up our transfer to Sarnus. So I usually kind of just wing the transfer angle, but because it orbits farther out than Jool, I do like maybe 15 to 20 degrees past 90 degrees relative to Kerbin, and I usually am able to get a good encounter that way. We've just started our burn. It looks like it's going to be about 2,500 meters per second of delta V. And because of this nuclear engine, we're operating in a much higher efficiency than the regular chemical engines in the stock Kerbal Space Program game. This is more akin to the Nerve engine. It's just a larger variant from the Kerbal Atomics mod that I mentioned earlier. Yeah, pretty useful. It does generate some heat, so I'm using some radiators just below my spherical fuel tanks that you might see a little bit like glowing red to just dissipate that heat. I believe those radiators are from the mod System Heat or something like that. Looks like we just finished our burn and we have an encounter already. And while we wait to coast out of the Kerbin system, I'll give you guys a little bit of a tour of the interior of our spacecraft. So yeah, we're using free IVA, which is a mod that allows us to move freely in the interiors of our spacecraft. Some of these parts that you might be seeing here are space station parts included with the stock-alike station parts expansion Redux mod. And my favorite part about this mod is the centrifuge parts that it puts into the game. We're climbing down into one of the arms of the centrifuge now. This is going to kind of provide some of the living space for our Kerbals on our multi-year voyage out to the Sarnus system. So it's pretty cool. It's got fully traversable interiors. We just passed kind of like a dining area. Down at the bottom here we have our crew quarters. And in the other arm, I believe we have a gym as well, where we can, manage our health in low gravity, and some more dining space and the crew quarters again at the bottom. So right now my crew is a crew of 9 Kerbals. 6 will be going down to the surface to man the base that we'll be deploying there, and 3 will remain in orbit with this colony ship. Right now I'm just looking ahead to make a small course correction maneuver, just to trim our flyby of the Sarnus system so that we can work on getting a gravity assist around a giant moon around Sarnus called Slate. We're going to be performing a maneuver that's very similar to a tie-low gravity assist capture in the Jool system that you might see some people doing, which basically means that we'll be passing really close by one of these large mass moons, and it'll fling us in the direction that Sarnus is orbiting, which will allow us to capture around it without having to expend any fuel to catch up with it at our apoapsis. So I'm just working on setting that up. So what I want to do is kind of line my periapsis of my flyby up with one of the outer edges of the moon that I'm trying to gravity assist with. And I'm just going to set it as my target here. It's that kind of tannish colored orbit. Just set it as my target. And see, we're just skimming the outer edge of its orbit here. And on the retrograde side of Sarnus. And then I'm going to be tweaking kind of the details of my flyby so that it puts me in a resulting captured orbit around Sarnus that I like. And you can see that in the dotted line, the dotted red line orbit. That will be our resulting orbit from this gravity assist. So what I can do is I can just tweak the angle which I slingshot around Slate, or the height that I slingshot around Slate, and that will affect my resulting captured orbit around Sarnus. I'm getting ready to execute that burn shortly. Okay, looks like that's our gravity assist capture maneuver all set up. All we have to do is wait till we have entered the sphere of influence of Sarnus in about 4 to 5 years. That's how long it takes to travel out here on a efficient, just elliptical trajectory. And there it is. You can see the moon swinging around it in our time warp here while we wait to drift closer in. And so that big one here is Slate. That's the moon that we're going to be slingshotting around to capture around Sarnus. We're going to be passing just a few kilometers above the surface. Cool. And that slingshotted us into orbit around Sarnus, which is a gas giant of the Kerbal system, analogous to Saturn in real life, just past Jool, added by the Outer Planets mod. And yeah, pretty cool. Probably one of my favorite planets in this mod, if not my favorite. And what we're doing right now is setting up a maneuver to rendezvous with Tekto, which is this slightly inclined orbit that I've set as my target further out in the Sarnus system. So we're doing a slight inclination change in addition to our prograde burn out to intercept the moon. And it looks like we've just got our flyby now, and I'm just going to adjust my approach. Okay, we've got a much better flyby now, and we'll just set up our braking maneuver to capture around the moon and wait till we drift out in a few days to meet up with the moon. There it is. It's got kind of like a greenish atmosphere with some purple or pinkish haze in the sunset areas, which is pretty cool. Here we are just finishing up our capture burn to circularize around the moon. I'll just tweak to make sure it's a little bit more precise. But we can get ready to send our first expedition down to the surface with one of our space planes here that I was talking about after I circularize just once again. This is Tekto, which is an atmosphere-rich moon of the Sarnus system and the Titan analog in KSP. It has, I think, like an atmospheric density of maybe 1.25 of Kerbin, and it has an atmospheric height of about 90-something thousand meters. Pretty cool. So what I'm doing right now is just transferring some of my Kerbals into the first of my space planes and getting ready to detach from the mothership. So these space planes are powered by a small nuclear reactor, just kind of on the bottom end of it, just getting these engines ready real quick. But I do have to start my reactor. It's a small reactor, I think, from the near future electrical mod, and it provides the electricity used to power these rotor engines. But right now I'm using the rocket engine to deorbit this space plane so that we can fall into the atmosphere and start checking out the surface for a good spot to land our base. That's kind of what the mission of this first little excursion down to the surface is. We're trying to find a nice flat area with kind of like access to multiple biomes relatively close by. That'll be a good spot for our base for some good science and surface operations. So due to the low gravity and high pressure of the atmosphere, it's really easy to break or re-enter into the atmosphere. The orbital speeds aren't super high, and that means that you don't have to, endure the same kind of like re-entry heating that you would experience on Kerbin or Eve, for example. We've just broken through the cloud layer and gotten our first look at the surface. It's fairly mountainous in this region, but there's kind of a green glow to everything from the atmosphere. We throttled up our engines and we're flying really nicely. Here's a view from the interior of our space plane. Pretty cool. And just over these mountains we can see one of the oceans of Tekto, or lakes of Tekto. Certain parts of the lakes or oceans, I don't know which one they are frozen over with little bergs on the surface. The oceans are made out of some sort of hydrocarbon, which is liquid at the surface temperature of Tekto, which is extremely cold this far out from the sun. Its real-life counterpart, Titan, which is a similar moon around Saturn, has lakes of hydrocarbons as well, mostly methane and ethane, which is pretty cool. Right now we're coming in for just a really quick surface landing to knock off that decoupler that didn't knock off when we detached from the mothership. So yeah, that was what exploded. It wasn't our ship or anything. We just knocked off that decoupler that stayed on, and we're just taking off again. Checking out some of the surface features, we have kind of like these giant stalactite kind of looking things. I wonder how those formed. Anyways, we're coming up on a promising landing site for our base. It's kind of just at the foot of some of these mountains in this relatively flat lowland areas. Although this region of Tekto is slightly at a higher elevation relative to the rest, I think that will be useful for making it back up into orbit for a little bit less fuel. But yeah, I think this is a good spot. So what I'm going to do is just find a nice spot to park this thing, and what I'll be able to do is use it as a reference. I can set this landed space plane as my target for my deorbit burn of my base to try to land it relatively close by more accurately. So if we switch back up to the mothership in orbit, we can get ready to prep our our base for this deorbit burn. And we'll have to transfer our Kerbals into the base, or some of them at least. We're going to save the rest of the crew for another trip with that other space plane down to the surface. But like I said previously, 6 Kerbals are going to be manning the base on the surface, and 3 Kerbals will be manning the mothership in orbit. Cool, we're just going to detach our base here. We've got a small booster on the end that will allow us to do our deorbit burn, and we're going to try to drop ourselves kind of like straight on top of it. Almost eliminate all of our horizontal velocity or our lateral velocity, and hope that we can just kind of like fall straight through the clouds on top of our little plane that we've set as our target on our landing spot. And we'll see how accurately we can do that. Looks like we're going to fall a little bit short, so I'm going to try to make some last-ditch little sideways burns to kick ourselves a little bit more north towards our preferred landing site. And I think I'm going to deploy my parachutes to keep this a little bit more stable while I use up the rest of our fuel, trying to burn our way over to our preferred landing spot. I think we're going to be really close, though. So I just detached that booster, and these parachutes should be opening up. There they go. And we're traveling at just over 5 meters per second. Oh, that parachute did not work out. And yeah, so we're just waiting to land here. We had a small explosion, but everything looks to be intact. So I can kind of use my rover here on the end to rotate the base to a alignment that I think is cool. And yeah, it looks like we've got our base set up. So I'll just go ahead and inflate that top habitat module and try to deploy these wind turbines, although I guess the wind speed was too high that they broke. Oh well. So the parts I've used to build this surface base are from the mod Planetside Exploration Technologies, including the rover. It's pretty cool. Recommend checking it out. But right now we have to fly our first space plane over to the base, which should only be a kilometer or so away. And I'm just going to try to land right by the base. There it is, just below us. We were actually pretty close, you know, to almost hitting the landing spot that we chose. And it is relatively flat here, so I would call that a success. Flying a plane on Tekto is really a breeze because of the low gravity and the high atmosphere pressure. You can stay afloat in the air just to kind of glide at a much lower speed than you would on, like, say, Kerbal, for example. And I like that it presents an interesting challenge for spacecraft, or, you know, to navigate this area. One thing that I think this moon has forced me to do creatively is to build a plane that uses propellers to make use of the atmosphere, which I haven't really done before, which is pretty cool. We just planted a flag, and we're getting our first set of Kerbals out to populate the base. This is the interior. This is a science module. This is a habitat module, another habitat module, and this is the central core command station of the mod. We're getting a little bit of a weird kind of green glow on the inside, but I guess I can attribute that to the weird green glow of the planet itself. We're just getting our second Kerbal in here. Some cool spots. We have another wing of the surface base, but up top in the hab module, we've got some cool porthole windows and a bunk bed. I guess there's 3 bunks, but there's going to be 6 Kerbals, so I guess they're going to have to rotate bunks. But yeah, pretty cool, I guess. So now it's time to run our second set of crew members down to the surface base. So I'm just transferring them into that last remaining space plane that we are detaching from the mothership now. And we'll get ready to fly that thing down to the surface to meet up with the rest of them. Looks like we're overshooting the base a little bit, so we're going to have to fly our way over the distance that we've overshot. Cool, so we've successfully landed our space plane back at the base, and this will be our final set of crew for the surface base. We'll just go ahead and turn off this reactor here, shut the plane down, and get them out and walk them over to the base. So now we've got the Kerbal back inside. I want to check out the other wing of the base. So just through this utility module here, we have our hydroponics module where we're growing our plants and food and stuff like that. And then beyond there, we have our rover docked to the other end of the base. And yeah, that's the full tour of the base. We'll be going on a short rover excursion over to one of the, icebergs, or I don't know what you would call those, methane bergs or something, over just by the coast. We're going to take our rover over there and just check it out later on in the video. But first, let's check out what it's like here in Tekto. We'll watch the clouds roll by and the sunsets, and even some of the weather. So yeah, it rains on this moon. It's got some sort of a hydrocarbon water cycle, or not a water cycle, but whatever you would call that. It's got a liquid cycle of some kind that produces this interesting weather. And I think that's probably what's producing these stalactites on the surface, is that the rain is probably building up these stalactites just like they would on the interior of a cave, which is pretty cool. So now we're going to go on that rover excursion. We just walked through the hydroponics module and right into our rover with a lovely interior. This is from the Planetside Exploration Technologies mod. Pretty cool. We're going to be taking 2 Kerbals on a quick trip over to the coast to check out the conditions over there. But yeah, pretty cool. We can go ahead and detach the rover and start driving it over to the coast. Check out the sights on the way. So here we are at the coastline. We'll just hit the brakes here and get out to do some science and stuff like that. And it's probably time to go back, so we'll just run these experiments that we have mounted on the back of our rover and start our way back to the base. It's pretty cool. The ice has a really cool reflective texture. I really like it. You can turn on colliders in the parallax menu if you want these surface features to have collision. Yeah, that's just a cool setting. And here we are back at the base. We'll go ahead and dock it to one of the porthole sides of the base and get these guys back inside. Cool, we got it docked back to the base. We'll go ahead and get them back inside the hatch into the command center. And now that we're back, that's going to be about it for today's video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this episode in the Kerbol Komplete series, where we're exploring the planets and moons from the Outer Planets mod and Minor Planets expansion for Kerbal Space Program. Yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.